Sabotage Studios spent a lot of effort and talent on recreating the aesthetic of an old-school SNES RPG. The sound, feel and look of the game is undeniably excellent. The game is challenging at times, but it never feels like you need to level grind to continue playing if you get stuck, which was a great choice. The music is reminiscent of a bygone era, but it does nail the SNES vibe without sounding too derivative or unoriginal, outside of a few small exceptions. The game absolutely looks gorgeous, and I wish more modern games would take 2D artwork this seriously. The pixel art style used is beautifully detailed, both for the environments and the characters and enemies, as well as their immaculate portraits. Several enemies have very creative designs, especially the bosses, which I found amazing. There are some really great visual effects going on in the world despite the game being 2D, and it really does come together nicely. The towns and dungeons are large and beg you to explore for secrets and items, although some areas may require backtracking. The music consistently hits a high bar. Additionally, nearly every song in the game has versions for both day and night, as well as a tavern band style that you can play at every and once you find the related sheet music. They spent a ton of effort on the OST alone, and it paid off pretty well, and that's ignoring the fact that they got Chrono Trigger's composer Yasunori Mitsuda for a chunk of it. The writing is not compelling or interesting. The game is led by duo protagonists who are practically indistinguishable from one another. They lack a clear and distinctive identity. They do not disagree or challenge each other on anything that happens during the story. They somehow feel less personable and engrossing than the average silent protagonist, despite having actual words to say. Your childhood friend Garl is overwhelmingly positive and cheerful to a fault, but he at least resembles something close to a personality. Sadly, the game gives him way too much spotlight. I mean, on every single instance where the main character should be the one doing the talking or making choice, he would butts himself in and does the talking, the picking and the leading. In one way, you could say that he is the real protagonist of the game. A generic good versus evil story might have been acceptable if the characters were interesting. It's enjoyable watching the characters bounce off each other in games, but this dynamic never happens in Sea of Stars. The campfire segments seem perfectly suited for some banter between the characters, but they never amount to anything either. The combat in Sea of Stars is fine but feels undercooked. It is identical to the Mario and Luigi RPGs where you press a button in time with an attack to increase damage output, or press it to reduce incoming damage during the enemy's turn. Although in some cases, there is no clear indication of how you are supposed to time things. The main issue with Sea of Stars combat is the lack of skill variety and complexity. Each playable character only ever gets 3 moves plus one ultimate ability that acts as a limit break. It just isn't enough for a game this long. You'll see the same 2 or 3 moves over and over again. It's a novelty that gets old quickly, and by the time you've unlocked your first ultimate ability, you've seen the limits of the combat system. The second issue was the break mechanic. Each enemy has a set of locks that can be broken to stop them from using high-damage special moves. For most of the early game, breaking is numerically impossible far too often, either because the enemy dies too quickly or you have too few turns to break 3 or more locks. I was commonly finding enemies with 4 locks and would only have 1 or 2 turns to break them. The game also has a combo meter for other special moves that does not cost MP. They sometimes even have multiple damage modifiers, like being able to break crescent and hammer at the same time, which saves you an extra turn. The problem is that many of the level 1 combos are too weak and impractical. And in the instance you've built up enough meter to do a more complicated combo that may break someone, the fight is basically over. Outside of boss fights, I never felt like I was engaging with the game's mechanics, which is a real shame. This game is truly a mixed bag. On one hand, it has fantastic art direction, beautiful character, asset and background designs, creative map and level layouts, and pleasant music. On the other hand, it suffers from an uninspired good versus evil story, bland characters with no actual personality, dull dialogues, and an unpolished combat system. Personally, I would give its score of 7 out of 10. Thanks for watching.